I think we'll go ahead and get started. Welcome. This is my final in the series of our trainings, MPDS training, Good Housekeeping Training, MCM 6. Thank God I'm here finally, and I'm happy you've joined us today. I hope you've taken advantage of the previous episodes. If you haven't, we are recording these for later use if you like. You can access those on our website. So if you have that and want to participate in there, we do, if you want to get contact hours for that, be sure you do like a sign-in sheet and send that to us so we have that contact hour information. We also have something we're doing in this to track that contact hours is polling. So I do ask that you take advantage and use those polls when they come up, the poll questions. That's how we can track your participation throughout the webinar. So do participate in those poll questions when they come up. I'm Dave Reuter, Urban Conservationist with Franklin Soil and Water. I've got Brooke Fresher and Kylie Davis is in the background kind of running the show for us. So I appreciate their help. Wanted to just say thanks for all your help in this. It's been a big help. So with that, let's start. Let's put up our first poll question. I'm curious how many of you are involved in municipal operations or facilities. We'll give that about a minute or so to get those poll questions answered. Looks like the majority of you probably have some aspect of facilities management in your programs, or that's what you do in your job day in and day out. And really, good housekeeping is directed towards that. That's what we'll be talking about mostly today. As with the past episodes, if you've been to the webinars, I'm talking specifically to the new general permit that'll be coming out here shortly, some of the changes that are going on in that, and what that might mean as far as your program in your facility or even in your municipality, how that might change. So we're going to focus on the new draft permit, what that means, and I'm going to revisit a lot of things we have with all of these episodes, give you kind of a brief overview of MPDS for those that are new and the first time at the webinar. I apologize to everybody who's attended the last 3 or 4 episodes. You may have heard of some of this before, so I'll try to minimize what I go over and make this a little more directed. So end of the poll, looks like we've got about 3/4 of you involved with municipal operations. So thank you, I appreciate that. So I've included this picture with every one of my webinars. This is the famous fire on the Cuyahoga. This pretty much prompted what we know as the Clean Water Act in 72. This was a 1969 fire, and something that struck me with this, if ask yourself what's wrong with this picture, you immediately say the water's on fire, river's on fire, you've got fire and smoke coming off of the river. If I were to ask you that same question and remove that smoke and that fire and ask you what was wrong with this picture, you'd probably have a hard time saying anything was wrong there. And that's something that we need to look at when we consider water pollution. It's not only what's on the surface of the water. We're very visual creatures, and we don't recognize problems until we see something wrong with it. You've got to understand there's also what's in the water, what's precipitating out of the water, what's diluted in the water. This is all about water quality, and this program, this MPDS program, is about water quality. That's why we frequently say, only rain down the drain. We are looking at only rain fall going down the drain, clean water. So this is really about how we approach that. And I think what we're seeing is more specificity in what pollutants mean and what we're trying to focus on. If we look at the NPDES history, the regulatory history, you see that Clean Water Act in '72, really this 69 fire on the Cuyahoga prompted the Clean Water Act and development of the federal EPA. They were implemented in the same time frame. And that Clean Water Act really gave the states the authority to enforce that. But if you notice that, it's for point source discharges. So it really only affected sewage, publicly owned treatment plants and the industrial wastewater plants that were discharging directly to streams and waterways. And that's what that point source is. We don't get to the non-point source really until we look at the '87 amendments. That's when the phased NPDES requirements came in. The phase 1 and 2 rules. Phase 1s are for large communities, large construction sites and industries. And that large construction area is where you start really talking about what is non-point source discharges. The phase 2 rules for small MS4s, '99, that really applied to our facilities structures and what discharges to those. And a lot of what we see in the urban communities are non-point source problems. Again, what we see then when we look a little bit further, Ohio laws 6111 came about with the no discharge pollutants unless it complies with NPDES permit. That was in '92, kind of dovetailing with that '90 phase 1 ruling. The OAC 3745, which is Ohio Water Quality Standards, '98, that really came in front of that phase 2 rules and really defined what those parameters, what those pollutants are and what kind of levels we're at. So that's really when we see that non-point source kind of idea coming into play. And of course, the OSC 3745 39s, that's the small MS4 rules, and those have been effective since June 04. Something to note, this was just noticed yesterday or the day before, I forget which. I haven't had a chance to look at this myself. EPA, Ohio EPA, they noticed the change in 3745, some definitions to amend and requirements for the general, the NPDES permits. I think, like I say, I haven't had a chance to take a look at these, but I do think they're related to the release of the MS4 permit coming up. We should see that anytime soon, and this is probably just so that their rules meet the some of the requirements in the new draft permit. Take a look at them. I do suggest everyone always take a look at these rule amendments and make comments if you think it's something that affects you. That's a very big part of these rulemaking, and a lot of times it's overlooked. It's kind of hard to go back and say, well, I didn't know about this, but we told you so. So take a look at it, know what's in there, and make some comments if you feel that need. So we use a lot of acronyms. NPDES, National Pollutant Discharge Elimination System. That's the federally mandated regulations addressing water quality and quantity. And it applies to all MS4 communities, MS4, municipal, separate storm sewer system. So if I drop an acronym you don't know, throw it in the chat box. I failed to mention that. Brooks manning the chat box there. If you have a question, feel free to enter that into the chat, and we'll get to you at some point here as those questions come up. So I encourage you to respond. We treat these like roundtables where, if you even want to unmute yourself and butt in, feel free. So taking a look at Again, I've included this in all the presentations, and just because, you know, the idea of an MS4 kind of varies when you're talking about different MCMs. When we look at outreach aspect of the requirements, that really entails your entire MS4 boundary. We're trying to reach that population that you can reach within your realm. If we're looking at IDDE, you know, illicit discharge and detection elimination, that's really about what discharges to the facilities that you own and operate, that you need to be able to control the pollutants that enter that. So in that respect, we might be looking at catch basins and roadside ditches or stormwater ponds. You know, if we're talking about something on the, when we look at an MS4 that's not, if this were a discharging system, but in your MS4, construction might have a different requirement there. You would be required to be looking at that if that were in your MS4. So it's not always clear cut, just a good visual reminder of what we're talking about. And good housekeeping, this is about your municipal program and how you are perceived in your community. So anytime you're working within your community, you are basically in your MS4, and these things apply to your discharges. So be aware of that, regardless of the work you're doing within your community. So I talk about the program in your community. This is really what we're talking about. It's called your SWAMP, Stormwater Management Program. Every community, every MS4 should have a program and a plan in place that really defines the who, what, when, and where your BMPs will be applied. So what best management practices will be implemented. When we're talking good housekeeping, this may be your salt application. How do you know, what do you do every year for salt application? This may be about fertilizer usage. You know, you have people on staff that are trained for fertilizer. You know, you apply buffer zones to your water management areas, things of that nature. You know, do you have a leaf program, or do you do street sweeping? Those are the best management practices that would be applied to a good housekeeping MCM. When will they be implemented? You know, this is important, like I say, with street sweeping. You may need to look at your street sweeping schedule. In fact, one of the things we'll look at later is some of the performance standards for when these BMPs are implemented. Having that time frame, when is the best time to do this? Obviously, if you're collecting leaves, you know, summertime isn't a good time to be doing that. That needs to be done during fall. So that's an obvious given like that. But when you talk about other street sweeping times a year, there's been a lot of, the Federal Highway's done a lot of research on street sweeping and best management practices for street sweeping. There's been a lot of focus on implementing street sweeping at specific times a year to collect the most sediment or debris that you can at that time. It's not a matter of just implementing it 4 times a year. We will do street sweeping. Now you're going to be looking at when you do that street sweeping, how much you collect, and if there's changes that can be made to that program that will help you better collect debris throughout the year. So that's something to think about. Who will implement the BMP? You know, the who is the municipal staff. So this really goes to that everybody on the staff is responsible for some aspect of BMP. And this goes pretty much throughout all the MCMs. When we're talking here, you know, what BMPs will be applied in good housekeeping, you know, it's the road crews that are going to be plowing and applying snow. It's the maintenance staff, you know, it might be the seasonal staff that is there for the summer mowing season. You know, one of the big problems I've seen with mowing is directing that mower either into the water. You know, that discharge is blowing debris into surface waters, or it's blowing it into the street, into the gutter. That all goes into your system. You'll probably be cleaning out that catch basin later in the fall with your catch basin program. So everybody on the staff, this goes to planning and zoning. They are looking at areas that may have setbacks, that may be priority. You've got construction and engineering staff are looking at plans and how they might implement BMPs better on the sites, but it goes to all the MCM. So specifically when we're looking at good housekeeping, really your municipal staff that implements those BMPs should be called out in the stormwater management program, and that should be available. Most of them are available on the websites, and people should be familiar with what's in those stormwater management plans. How and why the BMP was selected, that's basically the rationale that you use. Is looking for that, why have you picked that? And this is becoming more important with the application of the TMDLs, which is coming up in the new draft permit. And we'll talk a little bit about that. But like I say, new draft permit, if you look up here, we're working on an old permit. This one expired 2019. The new draft is out in draft form and should be coming to us any day now. I would expect to see that any time soon here. End of October was the projected date, but I think with COVID, we're seeing just a delay in most things anyway. So some of the changes that are occurring in this draft, there's a lot of clarifications, making the minimum control measures clear, specific, and measurable, adding specific actions for watersheds that have TMDLs, and addressing commonly found compliance problems. That's what EPA is telling us is in that draft. That's pretty much what it looks like. And again, I'm going to rely pretty heavily on that red line draft and have some visuals of that here coming up to talk to specifically. So the MPDS permit, what's it mean? It's based on these 6 minimum control measures. And this what really makes up your stormwater management program is that public education, public involvement, illicit discharge detection, elimination, construction site, post-construction site management, and of course the good housekeeping, which we're focusing here today. So this kind of is my opportunity to update my training. The basic scope of the good housekeeping is develop an operation and maintenance plan that reduces pollutant runoff from city operations, such as fleet maintenance, road de-icing, stormwater system maintenance, include training programs, policies, procedures, and develop SWP3 for municipal facilities. That was pretty basic. It's been there for a while. Here's the draft language. And again, you see some minor clarifications in red. Not much changes to the preamble as it comes in with the pollution prevention, good housekeeping. Developing that O&M program includes training component. Use training materials available from OEPA. And that shall include employee training to prevent and reduce stormwater pollution from activities such as park operation, open space maintenance, fleet and building maintenance, new construction, land disturbance, stormwater system maintenance. Welcome to the training. We're covering part of that right now. That's why we do this, to meet some of these goals. Now, I highlighted that last paragraph there. It's been in the permit, but I did want to point it out for your municipal facilities that conduct activities described in 40 CFR. So this is where we get into the aspect of treating your municipal facility as though it were an industrial site. For a long time, municipal facilities have been somewhat exempt from any of the management aspects, and OEPA has wanted us to be little more cognizant of the fact that this is what, industrial sites have to do. You need to treat your site as though it were an industrial site, even though it's really not permitted under the industrial permit. So what does that mean exactly? We're looking at developing that SWIP, and it shall be developed and implemented in accordance with the SWP3 requirements of that industrial permit. So what I've done here is, I apologize for this site, it's very heavy. I just cut and pasted it out of that industrial permit. And understand, this industrial permit, this is the multi-sector permit that covers all of the other industrial activities that you may have a specific permit for, whether it's like a asphalt batch plant, or a concrete plant. Those things have specific requirements in them. A lot of those, depending on that SIC code, may have monitoring requirements that are, up to monthly. So there's very specific conditions for a lot of these. But again, this is the preamble for the general permit, and this is something that applies to all facilities in that routine facility inspection procedure. And at the very bottom there, I've highlighted that at least once each calendar year, the routine facility inspection shall be conducted during a period when the stormwater discharge is occurring. So something for your facilities. And again, up here, they're also saying these routine facility inspections should be conducted at least quarterly. So you should be looking at your facility quarterly and documenting an inspection relative to what is going on your site. This quarterly visual site assessment for stormwater discharges, again, very wordy, but the aspect of this is that you're collecting, or you're taking this visual assessment during a period of acceptable storm practices. So, it's simply how you go about doing this. But then I want to get to this last part. You should visually inspect samples for the following water quality characteristics: odor clarity, floating solids, settling solids, suspended. You're really doing a visual inspection of a grab sample. And with that other requirement that it happens during one of these quarterly inspections happens during a discharge. Well, I read this as the minimum requirement then is you're doing quarterly inspections of your facility and documenting those. During one of those inspections, you're taking a grab sample relative to those conditions that are in there. And I encourage you to take a look at that industrial permit, which we have attached. And look at the parameters there. Basically, what's a qualifying storm event that's defined in there. You're basically taking a grab sample during that storm event within the first 30 minutes and looking at the sample for these water quality characteristics and recording that. That's what we're recommending for SWIPs on facility sites right now. Doing that, having quarterly inspections of your assets on site, having an identified outfall that you might be able to sample from. You may have multiple outfalls that you can sample from. If they're the similar type outfalls, pick one of those and sample that. Doing it quarterly, I don't think that's necessary on these municipal sites. Doing it once a year, I think that is definitely worthwhile doing. Trying to collect samples, I've done enough water quality sampling to know that to find a storm event that occurs between 9 to 5, Monday through Friday, while people are on site, can be tough. Whether you get that qualifying storm event once a year, I think you're doing well, and I think you're meeting the requirements of that individual permit standpoint and the MS4 standpoint as well. So something to consider. going forward and into the next permit phase. So here, let's take a break for a poll question. Do you periodically inspect or monitor a facility? And I guess I will check with Brooke to see if we have any questions we need to answer, anything that comes up at this point. We'll get a poll question up there.
Let's see. There we go. I think that launched it. No, currently we do not have any questions in the chat box yet.
So again, it looks like we're running about 3/4 to a quarter. I think we've got about everybody responding. So 3/4 of you are inspecting periodically. I think that's a good thing. I guess I should have asked, are you taking grab samples? I would be curious whether or not people are doing that as well. It's something that I know we've looked at that back and forth as far as what kind of sampling needs to happen on these sites. And I don't think it's as clear for municipal sites, but I do think there is some aspect of grab samples that needs to be taking place. Thanks again for the poll question. We'll move on here. Again, looking at some of the performance standard language, this is where the bulk of the new permit changes really has occurred across the board on all of the MCMs. A lot of additional language there, more clarification than anything, I think. But it's also something that you're likely to see changes in the reporting. Will be reflected in the annual reporting as well, so that you're addressing some of these. Let's just take a look at these. Annual employee training. Like I said, that's what we're doing here. We're getting that one covered. Have your O&M program in place on how what's your general operating procedures at your facilities. Little clarification about salt piles. We've treated salt piles like they're suggesting for the most part, but now they're really looking at being, having them covered, no run on or run off from the salt piles. The new addition is the brine tanks having secondary containment or bollard or barrier protection on those. And I know a lot of the new tanks are double walled and not protected in any way other than that, using that double wall protection. I've always looked at that as being fine. It might take putting up a Jersey barrier in the off time if you happen to have storage over the season. Maybe protecting that a little bit more just to ensure that you're not backing into that. This all came about actually because the EPA was looking at a site and had someone back into a brine tank while they were there. So I think that's what they consider a common compliance problem. So do have some type of protection on those brine tanks. Where ditch MS4 maintenance has been performed, bare and inactive soils within 50 feet of surface water of the site shall be stabilized within 2 days of reaching final grade. Number 4 there really is mirroring the construction general permit requirements for construction activities. It's the same there. Anything within 50 feet of the surface water needs to be stabilized. So all areas of disturbance within a small MS4 soil stabilization apply within 7 days of reaching final grade. Within 7 days of this area is days. Like I say, same thing applies to construction. So they want the municipality to be doing the same thing that they're requiring construction to do within their community. This will kind of, this affects a lot of ditch maintenance activities, just the cleaning out of ditches. Generally speaking, those ditches are scraped and lined or not treated in the bottom of the ditch. Perhaps this is going to take a little bit better look at those areas within 50 feet of the waterway, and perhaps something a little bit different there, whether it's ditch blocks, even concrete line the remainder of the 50 feet to a catch basin, if that's the case. There may be some changes that need to take place regarding that 50-foot setback area. Implement a stormwater outfall and drainage system maintenance program to ensure that stable outfalls and conveyances are provided. This is another aspect of that, providing that stable outfall. When you do maintenance, perhaps this is where a new type of plan takes place. You either, something we've used in the county is infiltrating areas prior to the catch basin, something of that nature that's going to provide you with that stable outfall. This will come up with your program for looking at your outfalls in your community and mapping those MS4 locations, basically. So asset management, that's really what this is about, making sure your assets are well maintained. The last one is for non-traditional MS4s and how they can approach this. It doesn't affect us too much. And then the TMDL performance standards, that's another big aspect with all the MCMs. They've all had these performance standards added in with this Appendix A. If your community falls within that Appendix A, take a look at what the TMDLs are and what areas in your MS4 are affected by these. The list that they've included pretty much covers the gamut of TMDL pollutants. So count on you having to perform that if you're listed in that Appendix A. And this only applies to those Appendix A areas within your small MS4. But then the requirement, your pollution prevention good housekeeping program shall include at a minimum one of the following performance standards. Proactive street sweeping program with proper debris management and disposal, documenting that and prioritizing. And the crux of this, and I think the specificity really comes down to that. Your program shall document debris collected in order to prioritize the areas to sweep and the lane miles swept. Sweeping shall occur on curb streets 4 times a year. So if your program is this, you really need to be looking at that debris collected, and if you need to prioritize other areas. If you have the same catch basin that for 2 years in a row has 0 debris collected, why are you maintaining that one? Perhaps you need to focus on one that is problematic and perform maintenance on that more than once a year. And I'm always amazed that your staff really understands where a lot of these are already. They're usually responding to complaints. So whether your program is complaint driven, have a service request system that really focuses on when the neighbors complain about something, chances are it's causing flooding and maybe that catch basin needs to be cleaned out. If that's part of your rationale and justification for your program, be sure your stormwater management plan has that in there. That's how you approach that. But be aware of that. Look at those. It's taking your street sweeping to just another level and really looking at the data that you're collecting and prioritizing areas that need to be swept. Develop, implement proactive catch basin cleaning program, proper debris management. Again, this goes to that same kind of concept of where your taking a look at your data, prioritizing areas to clean. And perhaps we're looking at areas, you've got, we have areas with Darby setbacks in place. Perhaps we want to really promote that street sweeping in the Darby setback areas and focus on those catch basins. Regardless of what that is, that's your rationale. State that in your stormwater management plan and look at your data and make changes relative to what information you're collecting. Not just be collecting data to be collecting data. Develop and implement leaf yard waste collection program. I think most communities will probably defer to this one, but again, looking at that leaf collection program, how do you apply that? Maybe you have priority areas that clog more readily than other areas, lots of leaves, lots of trees. That's what you need to focus on. This goes to MCM1, where you have outreach to your community on your leaf and yard waste collection program. Having them not sweep or rake leaves to the curb, keeping it on the green space for collection, mulching those leaves, composting. That's really where these programs apply across the board, and everybody should understand that. As far as good housekeeping goes, like I say, that leaf and yard, if you're doing leaf collection, making it, I see a lot of calendars out there indicating areas where they will be providing leaf collection during a certain time of year. I got to say, this year has been a little bit different with leaf fall. We didn't have some hard freezes early on. The leaves didn't fall all at once. We had some varieties that dropped leaves sooner. We have some that are still dropping now. I've raked my yard a couple times completely already this year. So that's really kind of a different performance standard throughout the year. So be sure you're implementing that leaf and waste collection program appropriately. So this is usually the time of year I get to meet with all you guys in person and walk through your sites. We've done a lot of walkthroughs of facilities. It's different this year. We're going to have to just rely on some pictures and talk about general issues with sites that I've seen. Hopefully this helps you out a little bit. Talk about some common issues. Generally speaking, probably one of the biggest issues with sites is just the unkeptness of sites, let's call it. Keeping your site orderly. If you ever have a OEPA audit visit to your site, generally an unkept look will have a greater focus on things. Not having covers on containers, unidentified containers in locations, things of that nature, just keeping a clean site. Your facility is a tool for you to use. That's basically what this is. Having dirty tools, having unorganized tools, that's a difficult thing to handle and manage. So really take a look at your site, the cleanliness of it, and how can you affect that, making sure things are properly stored. And we can provide you with all sorts of input on what that means and how to do that properly. Feel free to reach out to us anytime. Another aspect of municipal facilities is they're always kind of left with the leftover properties within the communities. So a lot of these are in floodplains, next to creeks, in low-lying areas where drainage occurs. And that's kind of a leftover legacy that we've had to deal with a lot of these municipal facilities. But when looking at those, this one, for example, has a storm water system that runs right through a building underneath their salt dome, and then a couple of other catch basins that discharge directly to the creek. So those red circles really are priority areas. If you're going to look at something, be really concerned with this and focus on these. This one, there was a floor drain in that building directly discharged that we took care of, and addressed that problem. The salt dome, their loading facility is located in an open area. That's fine. It's just that is floodplain in that location. So being aware of that, they actually have floodgates on the front of their salt dome, so they're not getting a flood event that is washing away salt into the environment. And then that catch basin is located for drainage that comes out of their bulk storage areas. So looking at that discharge there, those are some critical spots to look at, particularly with this site because of the situation that it's in. Here's a storage yard where a lot of different things occur. This has a lot of off-site runoff that comes onto the site that is basically clean stormwater runoff. Why mix that with anything that you might have on the site there? So, the idea of providing perhaps silt fence around any debris piles that you put up there, maintaining that off-site flow so that it's directed to your catch basin without any mixing. That's the kind of thing to look at when you're managing these sites and determining what's going on with your site. So that outfall, again, is very critical to this site and what happens with that. Maintaining that grassed waterway down through there, that's just an added benefit, and not disturbing that across that drainage area is of importance there. Here's another small municipal facility, small maintenance yard. They installed a gas facility right off of the parking and the paving there. You notice the red lines are contour lines. The shaded area is floodplain. So we have a fueling facility right off the edge of a floodplain. This has been designed so that there are barriers around that and somewhat of a containment area in case there's spills. There's spill kits available at the station itself for any of those incidental spills. And just having that standard operating procedure with this site for the staff is something that's very important to have, and that spill prevention, pollution prevention plan in place and what to do. We visited a lot of sites that have spill kits in barrels that they buy commercially, and I've generally asked staff if they've ever opened them and looked at them. It's like, no, we've never used it. We don't know what's in there. I suggest you take a look at what the use is of those. It's your staff that's going to be using those. Be sure they know what is in there, what it takes to apply those, and what things to use during that application. So I encourage that use and that training. And if there's anything we can do to help, like I say, feel free to contact us. We're more than happy to help. So speaking of audits, there happens to be this afternoon, Ohio EPA and Ohio Stormwater Association are presenting this Ohio EPA MS4 audits webinar. I encourage you to sign up for it. If you haven't already, take a look at that. It's coming up this afternoon at 1 o'clock. I believe you can still sign up for it. I know I got notice of the Zoom meeting today, so be sure if you're interested, it's coming up this afternoon.
Yep, and the file for the flyer is also posted in the top of the chat box, so if you need the link, the working link, it's in there as well.
Awesome, thank you, Brooke. So take a look at that if you're interested. Like I say, this will really take a look at all the MCMs, what EPA is looking at for audits. I would expect, so their audit program has been going around. They are looking at kind of a 5-year rotation, I believe, in their auditing. So if you haven't been audited in a while, there may be a chance that your program will be audited here shortly. So we are here to help you keep in compliance with those MS4 audits. So if you have questions, again, feel free to contact us, and we are more than happy to help out. I think I'm down to my last poll question. And I hope everybody has got something out of this. We're finishing up a little bit early with this webinar. I guess that just goes to my
You're just super efficient.
anticipation for this. I just want to get it done. I won't ever schedule a 4-week series of webinars. This has been nothing but week-long stress for me getting these presentations together.
I will add that I added a link as well in the bottom of the chat box. Ohio LTAP is also doing an upcoming snow and ice training, a 2-part webinar series on the 17th and 18th of November. So that link to that flyer and registration information is in the chat box as well.
Great, awesome. Glad to see this webinar was helpful. I really do appreciate your attendance, and I hope you got something out of this. With that, I think we'll call this an end. I can get back to my maintenance here. I need to do some cleaning on this structure back here.
Your structure is in need of some maintenance.
Well, I hope that helped. Again, I will close this out, and if there's no questions, quickly, anything in the chat box to answer?
I don't see any questions. We're getting some kudos. And I will also be following up anyone that needed certificates. If you don't get an email by me by the end of next week, let me know. But my plan was, since there were multiple people attending multiple webinars, that you're going to get one email with all your certificates and resource links to everything at one time. So look for that. And if you need anything, just let me know. But no, I do not see any other questions coming in.
All right, sounds good. Like I said, feel free to contact us if you have any questions or need some help with something specific. We are here to help you. So with that, I will say so long and thanks for attending.